Hello, AI Tinkers. Welcome to One Shot. This is the global stage. This is where we bring the pioneers, the people on the bleeding edge to come and share under the hood a little bit and give us a sneak peek of maybe some newer stuff and hopefully inspire and enable you tech on your projects too. I'm here with Paul, the founder and CEO of Browserbase, and also the MC and organizer of AI Tinkers in San Francisco. Paul, welcome.
I'm so happy to be here and be among pioneers and builders and me. I don't know how I snuck in, honestly.
Awesome. Well, what do you have for us? Let's dive in. I'm really curious to see all the new stuff.
Happy to dive in. You know, as you mentioned, I'm the founder of Browserbase, and what Browserbase is we're a code interface for the browser. So more and more often, AI agents and modern software is an agent in a way, is using web browsers to take actions on behalf of people. The future of software is software doing the work for you, and people often work on the web. We saw this stat recently, which is like 1.5 billion people use the web every day for their jobs, 3 hours a day minimum.
Yeah.
That's billions of human hours spent doing things online. And if you want software to automate work on your behalf, you have to use a web browser. So running a web browser in production is really hard. You have to, one, run this binary called Chromium. It's pretty beefy. It's like as beefy as a database. It's 250 megabytes. If you use Chrome on your computer, like we're running right now, it's often the most performance intensive thing on your computer. So it just is really painful to run. So that's kind of what the company is. It's browser infrastructure. And it's satisfying one part of that promise, which is that AI needs browsers to run. We provide browsers. You can connect to our browsers, spin up a browser in many regions, 4 regions right now. And maybe people have seen that before. I showed that, but maybe the more interesting is to talk about Stagehand, which is our new code interface for the browser, which is our natural language to browser automation framework.
I love it. This is getting to the thing that originally I found most inspiring. Right after GPT-3 came out, I was like, wow, you've got human intelligence in a thing, but it can really just talk to you. And I want to get work done. I want to have it like do amazing stuff. And there were a few tweets early on. Do you remember, I actually shared it with you earlier, the Sharif Shamim, I guess. He's Lexica art guy now, but he did a tweet that was like, I gave GPT-3 access to Chrome and I'm having it buy AirPods online for me. And it was like, that for me was the, oh, wow, what can we do with GPT-3 at the time to do interesting and mind-blowing, amazing stuff. And it leads you right to like, let's control the browser. I just have to say, when I first heard about Browserbase as a thing, I was relieved. Finally, somebody's building this piece. This needs to be an infrastructure piece. So
it's really, really hard to deploy anything that uses Puppeteer, Playwright, or Selenium, the 3 browser automation frameworks. And that's why I started this company. It was like, I was trying to build these kind of like AI automations and just deploying my code to production was super painful. I couldn't get it working in a Lambda. Things would break. And I mean, that's really what the browser-based infrastructure platform is for. And maybe I can show some code.
Let's do it.
So I actually have our browser playground set up here. This is what you see when you sign up for Browserbase. And I have I'll do the to-do list one. It's kind of cool. I have some pre-written Playwright code. There's no AI here, but what's really nice is when I click run, this is going to connect to a browser in the cloud. You don't have to do any provisioning. You just literally point it at a remote browser and it works. And that was the V0 thing I wanted. I wanted to be able to write some code, have it run in the browser, and do this work for me. In this case, it's going to go to this to-do list website, and it's going to go through these items and hopefully click on an item to make it work. But if it doesn't, that's okay, because we actually have this really nice AI code gen feature down here too. So when you're connected to a browser, you can run commands. Like I can go like, let me go back to here. You can kind of see it now going through and checking off some of these to-dos. This is all actually hard coded, right? But, in an AI agent world, you kind of want to use natural language to control a browser. So let's say add a new to-do, film the podcast. And this kind of introduces this new concept. We already have browsers running in prod, but what if we also use an LLM to generate the browser code? And you can kind of see here, we added this new film the podcast. It's on here.
So you're running it too.
Yeah, it's running
in
it
a session.
It's live in session. And maybe I can say like, check the film the podcast to do. Because now we're filming the podcast, right? And imagine exposing this kind of natural language interface to a browser. It really opens up a world where LLMs that are making decisions about what to do
Yeah.
and then take these like lower level decisions and hand them to a browser.
Yeah.
And
And for now, this is like based. What happened? Did you say? That's fine. The Selenium scripts and these Playwright things are very brittle.
Well,
like you can.
This AI thing, it was just more of a hack to put it in this kind of playground. This is kind of what it's a nice segue into what Stagehand is, which is a fully featured AI web browser SDK. And Stagehand, we think, is the natural successor to Playwright, but built for AI automation. So if you kind of can see, it's going to be open source. It's this GitHub repo right here. Nice. And it's a AI browser automation SDK, which is a very simple interface: act, extract, and observe. And maybe the best way to kind of show how it works is to write some code.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if we're feeling bold, I have some Stagehand code right here, and I'm always like trying to learn about the latest and greatest in AI, as you are. So we have to go to the AI legend McKinsey, well known in the space, and maybe we want to like grab their blog posts, right? So if we open this page up, you can kind of see there's a cookie banner, there's titles, you have to scroll to the bottom. So maybe the best way we can do this is writing a simple script. What we'll do is, we'll go to this page, stagehand.page.go to, and what we're also going to do is maybe we can close the cookie banner. Thankfully, cursor has got me here. So we'll just tell this action to close the cookie banner. And once we do that, we can extract all the things on the page.
So it's just at the same procedural level as like a Selenium script or whatever, but instead of like dealing with like literal DOM pointers, you're swapping in like human language, and then somehow you're interpolating that with an LLM behind the scenes. So you get the benefit of like a very clear, logical like pattern. But can you pop up a level and just go, hey, you figured out for me?
Yeah. So maybe I'll kick it off here, and I of course grab some sample code just to make it easier for me.
And walk through what is here.
Yeah. So what I have here, and as I kind of go, first we have the page go to the website. We ask that it close the cookie banner using our simple act method. Act takes a low level instruction. It's not going to order you a pizza, but it will close the cookie banner. It needs to be an atomic instruction, and then performs it on the page. I'm using the Sonnet model. You can bring your own model.
Wow.
Next,
at each action level, you could. That's cool.
Yes, you can actually, like, some models are better for extraction. So for action, if you want to change that up, maybe you want 01 for actions, but you want, 40 for really big context extraction.
Right.
You may want to use those in parallel.
That's cool.
And on the extraction side, what we do is we give an instruction, we give a Zod schema with a title. Now, this is all dependent on prompts too. So if you prompt it poorly, it's not going to work very well. So it's worth kind of playing around with it. Okay. But if we go ahead and open up Warp, I love Warp, and we run our example script, it's going to open up a browser right here on my web application, and right here on my browser.
This is your dev machine.
My dev machine, thank you. And you're going to be able to see, hey, it's looking at this page, it's extracting the DOM elements, pre-processing them, and then taking an action on the page. In this case, it looked at the cookie banner and said, I need to close this thing out.
What would it have done if there was no cookie banner?
It would have just proceeded forward because there's no way to take that action. You're right. So there's also it returns success or failure. So in that case, it would have returned a failure Boolean, and you can choose to, like, if that's a required action, you could throw an exception on that.
That's
so
cool.
It's on your decision on how you want to handle that. Yeah. So while that's kind of going, you can see it scrolling through the page. It's proceeding through all the chunks. Browserbase, Stagehand does chunk everything in here, and you can kind of see this is how we're doing it with chunk overlapping.
I was going to ask, like, how do you deal with 10 megabyte web pages these days?
Yeah, you got to divide and conquer, right?
Yeah.
So chunk it up, make sure you have some overlapping in the chunk. Eventually, you want to add semantic chunk searching, so you don't. Right now, it goes through
Vision?
every chunk.
DOM is gets you so far, and things render with JavaScript and are dynamic. What about Vision?
Yeah, so we have a Vision fallback. So if the action doesn't work with the DOM, it will go to the Vision fallback. You can also configure that if with a true false.
That's happening in the platform or in the framework automatically.
Yes,
and I could go look at the source code and change if I wanted to look at how that worked.
The source is all there. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So the benefit of that is, like, it is extensible, where you can, if you disagree with how I built it, you're always welcome to open a PR or fork it yourself and maintain it. But we think that, like, text space is the best approach, but you can fall back to Vision, or you can go to Vision first. There is kind of some configurability there.
This is cool. And so when you say act, what are the actions that you could do? Click buttons, scroll. What are the fundamentals?
Yeah, so clicking buttons, or filling in forms, or selecting, maybe not a button, but selecting a div. On the observe side, if you want to look for something, like if you're trying to assess the page, if the page is like of a page of a certain type, observe is very helpful for that.
Could you observe the raw source that it's crawled or that it's accessed? The actual page?
So it's built on top of Playwright.
Okay.
So all the low-level Playwright commands are there. If you wanted to build some hybrid Playwright and Stagehand commands, it's all kind of there. And you can see we actually grabbed the titles,
Cool.
which is all in here.
Oh, wow.
But what's really kind of cool is, let's say we have the same script, and maybe it's probably up here charting. You're charting a path, this, it's there. Let's say we want to run that without changing it on a different web page. So let's go back to cursor. Let's plug this in. So just by changing the URL, we can now run this same workflow. And that to me is what's so powerful about Stagehand. It's about running workflows that are not tied to a single web page. So let's say you want to book a demo website, a demo on any website, or you want to get a library card from every library in the world, or you want to buy a part from 1,000 different part vendors, right?
You ideally want to apply to a job on every job board.
Hey, one of our customers, like at the lowest level, you have some standard operating procedures, an SOP that you want to describe with natural language, and you want to execute that on the website.
Can I turn that script into an API? Like, can I reuse that in another agent framework, or just in my own code, or how would I?
Well, we're working on building integrations into popular agent frameworks where you can have a browser tool that's powered by Stagehand. But if you wanted to host this on an API somewhere, or on a server somewhere and call it with an API, you could wrap it in Next.js or Express or Django. Because the heavy infrastructure all runs on Browserbase. You could run the browser on Browserbase, run the Stagehand code where your code is, and in the end, it will pull the titles here within the blog, which is kind of cool. It's right up there, embracing the change. So that's kind of like what Stagehand is. We also have a Wordle one. So what I think is like one of the most interesting ones that we can do.
I think there are very few people who know Selenium or can write, Playwright scripts, right? And so what do? You go to Claude, you write them that way, and then you try to, and they're very brittle, and they change, the website changes.
Sure.
I'd rather write in this world where it's a little bit abstracted. That way, if the website changes, or, I don't have to understand what's happening in Playwright land, it's just way more fault tolerant.
Yeah. And if you're trying,
there's going to be some fuzz here with getting it tested.
Yeah.
And observing how it's working and go that process.
And that's where like Browserbase's observability can fit in really nicely here to see if it's actually working or not. That's Stagehand, and
this is launching today.
It's launching today.
When we publish the video.
When the podcast is published, it's launching today, and it's going to be completely open source. We're excited to kind of establish a new, framework for the community to build better web agents. And there's a lot of work to do. It's not perfect. Hopefully, I don't think it's production ready. It's definitely like staging ready. But we're excited to keep building on it and hopefully build with some of the community members here.
It's super cool. I think bring it to the hackathon. Let's get some teams using it and see what happens.
Cool. And we started out with JavaScript only, but hopefully it's really easy to port this stuff to other libraries, especially with CodeGen. Like if you have some sort of, CodeGen, you could just throw a whole SDK into Anthropic and translate it to Python. Even though it is Node.js currently, we hope to have a Python version soon. But you just want to make sure you're keeping them up to date together, and supporting multiple language SDKs means you sacrifice some velocity. So that's been something that we've been thinking about.
People will jump through quite a few hoops when it's solving real problems and it's doing it well. So which I think this is a gap. I think anyone who has actually tinkered on any kind of agentic browser automation stuff has run into so many problems that were just frustrating.
For sure.
So this is definitely helping.
I think the future for Stagehand is actually building, LLM framework level integrations, building a browser tool for AI. And we have a long way to go, of course, but by kind of building it in open source, hopefully there's some standards that we can help set for the community so that we're not all replicating the same browser tool, like it seems like it's kind of been, people have been shoehorning Playwright into, LangChain, for example. And I think that there needs to be a standardized browser tool that everyone uses. We hope by like at least laying down the framework for something in open source that more people can stop, duplicating some stuff.
That'll be a good call to action for the community to try to jump in and help.
Well, there's a ton of GitHub issues open on the repo, and there are a set of evals that we have running, and we're always looking for more. But a lot to come in the Stagehand world, so I'm excited.
What would be the steps to get it to work with like something like Crew AI, right? For example.
So you would have to build a Crew AI integration, but it shouldn't be that bad because once again, we only have 3 SDK APIs here. It's just act, extract, observe. So offering those up to an LLM to pick them as a tool calling interface, I think that it's pretty minimal, where it's not like something where it's not exposing click, It's not exposing, scroll. It's really exposing act, extract, or observe the page.
At what level is it actually calling the browser, the headless browser? Is it on the fly, like quickly writing and executing one of the scripts underneath? And what is the process that kicks that off?
Yeah. Should we show the source?
Sure.
Yeah, we could go into the source a little bit more. When we kind of think about like what the act call is, first of all, like we allow you to pass in whatever model that you want. It works with Anthropic or OpenAI models. We're looking to support more.
Yeah, cool.
But as you kind of go deeper into this thing, it's going to actually retrieve all the frames, retrieve all the chunks, do all of that, process the DOM in this one step. If it's the debug options on, it's going to draw the squares on the screen. If it's using vision or not, sometimes we select a vision, it kind of goes through here. But then it kind of goes into the actual like act call to an LLM, and you can kind of see here. This is where we're actually calling the LLM. We're making a prompt. We're stuffing in some system context, and we have a series of like sub tool calls that it can make. It can call scroll, it can call click, and from that kind of, LLM call, we actually get back the Playwright command. So, as we kind of go further down here, it's going to show you the actual Playwright command where it can take this kind of option or these args or these X paths and actually call it within the page. And that's going to be just down here. There's a lot of logging because we think that like logging is really helpful for debugging this kind of thing.
Let's talk about use cases for a minute. We're going to pop up to use cases for just a minute. So I have this, for 2 years or whatever, 2+ years mucking around with LLMs. They're work creators at the end of the day. They shift information around. They summarize really well. They give recommendations. They're a thought partner, et cetera, but they're not really getting work done. So then you look at the agentic API frameworks, and they're interesting because they promise long-running things and loops and decision trees and all of this and outcomes, right? But you look at the demo apps, and a lot of them are, again, work recommenders. They're research tasks. The actions are go to Google, look up something in my database, choose a path, make a recommendation. But click a button, get stuff done, send an email. There's not as many. There are some. They can do it. You can get it done. But it's hard. And I think that bridging to the world of like the browser, which has had decades now of investment to make work get done and do useful stuff, is the missing piece to make these systems actually useful. So now this is new, but you've been running the infrastructure in the cloud. You have lots of customers at this point. What are the use cases that you see that actually have the most traction today?
Yeah.
And what are the emerging ones in the sort of quote agentic world that you see that are exciting?
Yeah, when we look at the customers of Browserbase, we generally see 5 different categories. So first are just like AI agent companies like Multion or Convergence AI or Minion AI, who are building some sort of like generalistic AI agent that may serve a consumer use case, may serve some more advanced B2B users. They're building the Jarvis, in a lot of ways. Then we see like traditional B2B players, Parcha, who are doing like KYC. So they're kind of like automating business processes on the B2B side.
What's a KYC specific like task?
So if you need to verify that someone's their domain they give you is a real company, you need to go to their website and see like, does the address on this company website match the address that was provided? That requires some manual lookup. And then there's like the, what we call professional services area. This is where we see like AI helping lawyers, AI helping people doing immigration, AI helping financial professionals. Sometimes these are also research agent use cases, but where are you paying humans to spend time doing a task? Oftentimes we pay a lot of humans as a startup founder. You pay a bunch of lawyers and accountants and advisors that kind of help you do things. We're seeing people use AI on the professional services area to augment the high operational cost of those businesses.
So for that KYC thing today, you could easily create a script. You'd have to work on that script and debug that script, and then you deploy it. And then you have to maintain it if something changes, right? But if you want to support every possible website, it's not so easy.
Yeah.
With something like this, you kind of get partly there. Is that how people are approaching those?
The new pattern right now is that for the longest time, developers had to, you need you to give them a specific URL that they built the script against. But with this kind of code gen on the fly, controlling a browser, you can now take in any website URL and then automate it, which is a completely different paradigm from what we were used to before. We were writing deterministic scripts against the non-deterministic internet. But now we can write non-deterministic scripts that change as the web does too, which to me is a really big unlock.
Yeah, interesting. What are some of the boring problems that people run into when they start to do browser automation tasks from a headless browser in the cloud generally?
Yeah.
Like
boring tasks that customers are doing, or boring things when setting up the infrastructure?
Let's do the infrastructure first.
Oh yeah. I mean, the reason I started this company was that I spent a ton of time configuring and deploying headless browsers at my last startup. Nights and weekends trying to deal with it. It was almost my full-time job. And I built Browserbase so that founders who are trying to get the product market fit don't have to spend time on this. They can spend time on features that actually matter. A lot of like the painful things with headless browsers come from like, hey, making sure you have all the fonts configured. Like if you want to run because if you oftentimes if you install, Chromium on Ubuntu, you're missing the fonts for emojis, right? Or how do you make PDFs work if you want to download PDFs? How do you make legacy websites that only support IE actually work in Chromium? We have to do all these like workarounds and patches. And then like scaling it, Chromium takes in a WebSocket connection. It's called the CDP, the Chrome Dev Tools Protocol. To run headless browsers at scale, you're building a distributed stateful system. That means like every browser has a connection from a client. And if you lose that connection, the client loses their connection to the browser. So scaling a distributed stateful system means like whenever you do deploy, it might take a long time because people are running their production loads on this. You have to roll connections over to new browsers. And that's a lot of persistent connections. That means you have to have connection layers or load balancers that can handle long running sessions. So there's just a lot of like toil with the infrastructure. It's not like you naively think you just spin up a Docker image and point code at it, but it's a lot more than that, at least what we've seen.
I know things I've run into are just like running into CAPTCHAs and way more than you would as a human, right? Because people are trying to, especially now. In fact, we had a session earlier today about the trend in AI right now is people are locking down their content because they don't want it to be crawled. And there's a whole discussion on where we go from here. A lot of the content that was used to train models is disappearing. And part of that's like, Cloudflare launched a thing where in one button, if you want to protect your website from AI, you can. These things aren't going to affect humans, but they're going to affect these broader browser processes, right? They result in, not being able to crawl at all or not being able to get what you need. How do you help with that?
We do CAPTCHA solving and we do provide proxies. That's part of the integrated browser-based solution because it's just a really sketchy thing to go get on your own, to go talk to these CAPTCHA solving vendors. They're often being sold to people doing nefarious things, not people who are trying to automate, simple actions on the web. But it's clear to me that the rules of the internet are going to change. And that's why we partnered with, the founders of Clerk, Stitch, and Okta to all kind of have a staked investment in Browserbase and to give us a paved path into those platforms on the authentication side.
Speaking of auth, so for example, like here's a scenario, like walk me through how you do it. You don't have to do the code, but just tell me how. So with AI Tinkers, we've got cities, we've got city managers, we've got tons of great content, people doing demos, all this stuff. I would like to provide a feature that's authenticated and convenient so that city managers can maybe auth into like their LinkedIn and their Twitter and be able to one-click post make it easy for them to do recap posts, right? I've got all the data, I've got all the Gen AI to help them with that content. I just want to help them get over the finish line and just have it be auth-fed and I'll run a browser session in the cloud and make it the smoother I can make it, right? But I've got there's a lot to consider there with like credentials and auth and sessions and cookies and scraping rules and things like this. How would I go about something like that? Automation like that?
Generally what we're seeing people do when they're doing authentication is thinking about like, how can a customer or an agent authenticate on your behalf? And I think right now, the way that you do auth is kind of sketchy. You have to often share your raw credentials with the AI agent, or you need to share your cookie via your browser settings.
Which is the same as selling all the keys. It's like
in a way, it's the same scope. It is time limited most of the time.
If I wanted to do that, I could do that. Though I could hand there's an way in that I can hand.
Browserbase allows you to configure cookies on our browsers. So what we recommend to customers if they are doing authentication is one, maybe not sharing the raw credentials, but if you do, you need to make sure you disable session logging and recording so we don't keep those. But secondly, sharing a cookie is a good way to set it on a browser. We have a cookie persistence layer. It's called context. So if they want to reuse cookies across sessions, you could use our context API for that. But then you're going to be faced with a CAPTCHA. That CAPTCHA needs to be solved. Browserbase supports most modern CAPTCHAs. And there's a lot of legwork to doing authentication. And I still don't think it's as smooth as it should be. And I'm excited to see kind of how our authentication partners do solve this in the future. I've been hearing talks of like an agent OAuth, where what if an AI agent can try OAuth into your account and then you get an approval on your phone saying, hey, yes, this agent can access to my account, kind of like how you do OAuth with your Google account right now. Why doesn't that exist for agents yet? So I'm excited to see like what standards come out. I think we're in this really interesting time where we're way ahead on the tool use, and existing platforms haven't caught up. That's why I think our capture solving game at Browserbase is very short term, because I know longer term we are going to see agent level access for different applications, and it's just waiting for these platforms to catch up so we can kind of formalize.
The service providers will provide a way for
Exactly.
agents.
I think they have to.
Think that makes sense. Has anyone tried to? Have you seen that trend manifest yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen any like agent first applications yet. But I've seen a lot of people. I think we're just still so early. I've seen a lot of people automate existing applications.
Of course, it makes sense that the community and the providers would actually facilitate it. If it helps people, they'll do it. That makes sense. Cool. So here's the scenarios: is like how these websites change in subtle ways. Gen AI, I could get it working today, but it may not be repeatable always. It's going to break. I scaled up 1,000 instances of Browserbase and I'm doing stuff at scale. Something breaks. How do I trace back, incorporate the fix? How do I observe what's going on in this?
100%. When we think about observability, we just ran this session here, maybe in our Browserbase playground. We think about observability a lot. That's like one of the reasons I built this product, was like I wanted to be able to see what happens. And we actually have browser session recordings. So you can see what your AI agent did. And if for some reason it didn't go as well as you thought it would, or it didn't work, you can go to the recording and you can actually view the logs. You can see what happened, what was typed, what the query selectors were for your script, and really get a sense of like what the console logs were. All of this is kind of here for you to kind of see what happened in your browser session.
How do you envision that'll be? Is it connected to or in a first class way with any of the other observability platforms, or how would you see it being used? So
it's all configurable via an API. So everything you see on our sessions page is all available via an API, and that could mean like pulling in the session recordings and downloading them and embedding them alongside your framework.
What is the format of the recordings? Like literally video?
So it's actually not a video. It's a DOM mutation log. So this is actually a much more efficient format than recording a video of the session. And it's also a lot more portable. Like you just pull it out via an API and render it in a player. There's certain players that play these things back.
Have you crunched on that with LLMs to see if you can get useful insights from it?
I haven't yet. It's still pretty dense, It's still pretty dense, but you can turn it into screenshots if you wanted to maybe like put it through a, debugging layer. Let's say a session fails, you take the session recording, maybe you run screenshots across that and ask what went wrong. I haven't played with that yet personally. I'm excited to see like what options are out there. I think we're thinking about a deeper agent ops partnership too. I know agent ops been doing a ton of observability stuff here, and we're excited to help them build a browser-based integration into agent ops. So if you're using agent ops or observability, Browserbase's sessions will plug into it. Once again, we're building a browser tool for AI. So what does that mean? We need to have the observability that plugs in the existing frameworks. We've been focused more on making the tool great right now, but of course, good observability will help make the tool great in the future.
Interesting. I wonder if people are using this for the observable human part of it. Like, in other words, like, what are my end users doing with my Gen AI app on their own browser? Is there a way to plug in that way? Are they
so you can actually embed this kind of playground in Browserbase, like in a human in a loop way. So for example, let me like refresh this. And if I wanted to actually like go to Google and let a customer run this themselves, I can embed this live browser iframe, and then I can feed the results into a browser. So if I search for Browserbase, you can embed a small browser within your product, which is quite cool. We also have this thing called training mode, where let me, if I restart this, if instead of like maybe letting the user take actions, I want them to kind of like train my LLM. I need to gather some sort of training data, right? So the way that I would do that is by enabling training mode, which will then render, sorry, let me remove this weight here. So if I wanted to gather training data to like train my LLM, what I would do is use a training mode to actually go in and I can actually collect the code, Browserbase. That's a weird search term, but we're going to go for it, and click search. And you can kind of see left, the code is being generated as I'm typing. That would allow me to then plug that into an LLM, and maybe I can generalize this workflow, right? Cool. And if I run it again, I disable training mode. Now it's running the code that I just generated by clicking around. Cool. So there's this idea that like maybe really cool. Maybe with AI, you need to show the AI once before it does something. And that's kind of what training mode was designed for. I think that's really cool. I could definitely see this ambient AI that's I've dreamed of, like, it's observing me and it's helpful when it knows it can actually work well. Because most of the agent stuff doesn't work well most of the time right now. And that's fine. But when it does work well, I'd like to use it. And then it can follow along with me. And that seems like you've got all the puzzle pieces to maybe build something like that. Have you guys done any like hackathons on this stuff yet? Not yet. We need to sponsor more. I know we have one coming up in collaboration with AI Tinkerers on November 2nd.
Yeah, of course. You're going to MC it. That's going to be great.
Super excited about that. But no, I think we've been kind of heads down building, but with our upcoming fundraising announcement that we're going to be sharing our Series A, we want to do a lot more on the event side and really give more to hackers. We think that we're still so early in all of the AI infrastructure that we need more people to tinker and experiment and build, and we want to be fully supportive of the community there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, speaking of AI tinkerers and being the MC and the organizer here in San Francisco, the Mecca, what are some of the most exciting and innovative use cases? So I asked about the boring kind of where's the traction now.
Sure.
I want the wacky, the craziest uses of browser-based platform people that you've seen.
Yeah, I think the ones that I find most interesting are the super esoteric ones. We have a customer that uses Browserbase to help redeem your EBT or SNAP, which is food stamps receipts for cashback. And it's a really cool use case. Take your receipt, upload it to their app, and then they use Browserbase to kind of go and retrieve the data and automate that platform. Now, it's not really very AI at all, but really cool. It kind of goes to show that there's a really, really long tail of quirky integrations that exist. Another customer of ours that we saw a long time ago, they were doing compliance for oil fields. So if you own an oil field in Texas, you have to do this really long compliance process where you click through a bunch of forms. It's like a 10-step thing, and then it'll tell you if you're compliant or not. Pretty boring thing that these owners had to deal with all the time, and they just built some simple software on top of a browser to go automate that. So
it feels like there's a million little not even businesses, but income streams for solo entrepreneurs to go build on the edges of the crufty web.
That's what I'm saying. I really think that if I was an indie hacker, I would be building some esoteric automation on top of Browserbase, slapping some SaaS on top of it, and then selling it. You're replacing human hours, which costs tens or hundreds of dollars for something that costs 10 cents an hour, and there's a really good arbitrage opportunity there.
I think so. That sounds really fun.
Yeah,
that's really cool. All right, and so what are the most interesting and exciting projects you've seen lately from the community in general?
Just AI broadly. I've really been excited about what the team at E2B has been doing. I know they announced their fundraising announcement. I think that a code runtime for the browser sits really nicely alongside a browser runtime. We're really thinking deeply about what are these new tools are. Otherwise,
they'll also be at the hackathon.
They'll also be at the hackathon, of course. Yeah. Otherwise, I really like the company CoFrame, also a browser-based customer. They're doing this interesting stuff where they're generating front ends to help kind of improve your growth metrics. So it's like a generative front end using an LLM that will present to you the right copy and right configuration of elements on a page to help close a customer. And the way they do this is they A/B test those elements and say is this thing actually better or worse for your conversion? And we'll regenerate something to make it better. So I think CoFrame has done a lot of really cool stuff on the application layer. I really love Lighthouse as well, another browser-based customer. They're really making the O1 visa process super smooth. And I've just seen whole teams now bring on people as O1 employees. And it's because Lighthouse has really streamlined a lot of this process of getting an O1 with the help of software and browser-based. So a lot of interesting tangible applications of AI that are actually helping make things better at the application layer. And I'm excited to see more application layer stuff.
It's interesting. These are all the examples of that service as a software kind of paradigm shift, inversion. It makes sense. Great stuff. It's fun. And what are you tinkering on when you're not tinkering on Browserbase? Which may be all of it.
I mean, I say Browserbase is my day job, Stagehand is my night job, so I've been tinkering on Stagehand a lot. I try and stay up to date a lot with security as well. I'm a bit of a security nerd. That's how I got into software. So been really interested in seeing the applications of generative security.
You know what we should do, Paul? We had Varun, who was the Bangalore organizer of AI Tinkers. He was in Seattle and he came back to Seattle. He came to me saying, I'm really interested in security, whatever. Why don't we get some tinkers together? And by the way, I want to meet some chief security officers, so we'll invite some of them too. And we did a dinner. We're doing another dinner. We're doing a whole series. We should do this in California.
I would love to do I think an AI Tinker CTF where the capture the flag is fully AI driven, where it's generative security. That'd be really interesting.
Let's do it.
There's some really cool startups out there.
Let's do that. When are we doing it?
I don't know. Well, December is pretty open for me. How about you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
We'll have to make it happen.
All right, cool. All right. Thanks, Paul. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing us.
Thanks for having me. It was good to see you.
Yep.
Bye.